What's up guys, Shawnthebro here, and in today's episode of the Fighting Game Tutorial Series, we are going to be improving our character select and stage select, as well as the random functionality in those widgets. So the first thing I want to take a look at is the versus menu. For the random option, it wasn't displaying anything before, so I made a little question mark model and put it in here. We're going to actually put it in the right spot in this episode, and I'll show you kind of how I made this model. So we'll position it in front of the camera. I'm going to do that with you live since that is a little bit more complicated. But I want to have an actual model there as opposed to just nothing, before nothing was showing up like this. I think that's perfectly fine when you have a locked item or something you don't want to display, but random is a valid choice and I want to make that known to the users. Now on the stage select, I want the random to do something as well because the random currently was doing nothing. So it was just displaying the previous screen that we were on. So I've made my own little movie here for the random. I'm going to put that in as well. There's going to be some other bug fixes, such as sound effects not playing when you selected the random option are now going to play sounds. So you'll see when I press confirm on the question mark, it will play a sound effect. Player 2 can also do this as well. So after this episode, we'll have a fully functioning random selection. It's not super difficult, but I think it is actually pretty important. When playing it and just having nothing show up on the screen when you're selecting random, I don't think it looks so good for either the character or the stage. So I think this looks a lot better, and I'm excited to get this in. Before we hop into this episode, if you want to get caught up in the series, I can link you to this playlist in the top right corner right here, which is the Fighting Game Tutorial Series. You can check out everything we've done from our stage intros, our character entrances, our actual fight behavior, all that good stuff. Alternatively, if you don't care about that and you just care about the random selection and the character and stage selection in general, I'll link you to the first episode of Character Select. That way you can get caught up and see how we have all the logic in the blueprint that we're going to be using in editing today. But with that out of the way, we can go ahead and get started. So this is a code and blueprint tutorial series, but we're going to be doing everything in the blueprint today because we're just modifying our existing widgets. The first thing I want to do is fix a bug with the sound effects not playing when confirming the random selection option. So let's go to our widgets, and specifically I want to go to my character select screen. If we go to the graph in here and go to confirm selection, this is where we press the button to lock in our choice. And so for the confirm selection, we take a look at if the stage select screen is up, and if it's not up, we check to see which player is confirming their selection and check if they're already locked in or if they've already confirmed another selection. If they haven't, we go into this and we set the selection to the result from the function. At this point, we were checking to see if the character widget reference for P1 and P2 existed and was valid. If they were, we were calling trigger animation off of them. Now, trigger animation is what happens when we press confirm on something like the mutant. See, the mutant does his punch animation. On the mannequin, he does his walk animation. On the Vanguard, he checks his little pad on his arm. So, for this to exist, we need to have the character widget reference as valid for both player 1 and player 2, or basically whatever player or character is actually confirming their selection. Because we can't trigger an animation on something that doesn't exist. However, if it did not exist, like in the random option, since no model was being previously displayed, we weren't able to set P1 locked in or play the sound effect that we had at the end of our logic, because we weren't doing anything with is not valid. So from both of these validated gets, I want to drag off the is not valid and just skip the trigger animation, but still do the rest of the logic in the function. We still want to set the player 1 to be locked in or player 2 to be locked in. And we still want to play our custom sound effect, and for me that is my confirm 2 sound. So that way, for your random selection, you'll still play your sound effects regardless if this character widget reference is valid or not. A small fix, but very important. Missing a sound effect is noticed easily by players, and it just throws the game off a little bit. The next thing we want to do is actually determine what logic happens when we are determining the model to display for the random selection. You have a few options here. You could actually allow the random selection to complete while you're on the menu and display that model to the screen just like we already do for our characters, or you can do what I'm doing here. So we have our random true random. Basically the player selects random and they don't know the character they're going to get until we load into the game. And so if you're doing that method, then we want to go to the display character choice function in the character select screen. And in here, we were checking to see if we were player 1 or player 2. Then we were checking the current P1 selection variable, so essentially whatever character the player was highlighted over. So current P1 selection is player 1's current selection, current P2 selection is player 2's current selection. Now this was a switch statement with 0 through 2 because I have index 0, 1, 2 on my character select screen. But I also want to account for index 7 in my character select screen because that is random. So if we do 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, that is my random selection. So I pressed add pin until I got to the 7th index on the switch. And then at this point, I'm filling out the logic. Now, it is essentially the exact same as the ones above. I am just spawning a random CS actor, which is something we're going to make in this episode. You won't have this just yet. If you want, you can go ahead and set this up. So I have location marker P1 for all of these, and location marker P1 is essentially where the character is going to spawn here. So location marker P1 is over on this left-hand side. But actually, it's not part of the widget. It is something that we have in the world, since these are 3D models and not 2D images. So I can find my references to this, and I'll show you. It is set in the event graph. Basically, we were getting all of our CS location markers in the world, then checking to see if the component tags were player 1, and if they were, set it to location marker P1, and if they weren't, set it to location marker P2, since we only have 2 characters. Now, going back to display character choice, we're using location marker P1 and getting the default scene root, which is just essentially the first component, or the parent or default root component that we have there, and grabbing the world transform off of it. This is because we need a transform when we're spawning an actor, and we're going to spawn the actor there. That's what those location markers are for. Then we were picking the actor class that we wanted to spawn. So I have these CS actors, like mutant CS actor. That is mutant character select actor. So I'm not actually spawning my mutant in there. I'm just spawning a character select actor that we made that has a model of mutant and can play an animation or two. Now we need to go and make this CS actor so that we can spawn it. So I'm going to go to my content browser, and I have mine in blueprints, widgets, widget actors, and here's my location marker, and then I have a CS characters folder, and then I have these character select actors, and we're going to make a new one that I'm calling random CS actor. And to do this, we can right click on our base CS actor and create a child blueprint class. You could also do the standard method of adding a new blueprint class and picking the parent of base CS actor. Either method will work. I've called this one random CS actor, and now we're going to go into it. In the random CS actor, you'll see I've done nothing in the graph, so I can go ahead and get rid of that. I don't need anything in the graph for this one unless you want them to be able to change their color. So even though they're random, maybe you do want to allow them to pick like, oh, I'll take the second color from that random option. In which case you'd have to fill out some logic for that. But for me, it's just going to be true random. So it's going to be random character, random skin. And that means I don't need anything in the event graph. Also, if we go to our class defaults, make sure the skin array is empty. Since we made this a child of the base CS actor, and the base CS actor I did not make as a wrapper class, I actually put the mutant on it, then anything we did in the base CS actor under class defaults will transfer to the random CS actor, such as the skin array. I don't actually want to use these materials on my random actor. That's why I'm suggesting just removing elements from the skin array so there's nothing in here. And to remove them, you can just click on this little arrow. I know it's getting cut off, but just hit delete right here. Or you can actually hit the trash can and just remove all elements from the array. Now, as far as the other class defaults go, there's nothing really in here that you need to change unless you changed it. In the series, we did not change anything, so the skin array should be good enough. Now we can go to the viewport. Since the other actors do have a skeletal mesh Usually I just had a mesh in here, so it could be the mannequin, the mutant, the vanguard. However, I don't have a skeletal mesh for the question mark, so I actually made it with a bunch of static meshes. Again, not the cleanest method, but it only takes me a minute or two. I would highly recommend getting an actual model for this, or even just creating a 2D widget that you're going to spawn and put in this spot. I like the 3D model idea, I just didn't create an actual 3D model, so I created this little guy using a bunch of static meshes. But regardless, I would go into my skeletal mesh on my random CS actor and make sure that I remove the skeletal mesh. If you remove it, it should say none like this. Otherwise, it will have something like the mannequin in here. And you can just click on the drop down and select clear if you want to remove it. That way there is no skeletal mesh there. Now in here, I also didn't have to move anything else or change anything else. We kept it all the same. So the only thing I did is actually determine what I wanted my random CS actor to look like. And so I made a basic little question mark here. It doesn't look perfect, but again, I set it up in just a few minutes. It can be really quick. If you want to use this method in the meantime, before you get a more solid image or model to use here, then I would add a component of a static mesh. And I set it to be a cube, which I had from my friend Shadow Magnus, who made the Trail of the Wise level, but it is available in the starter content. So if you don't have starter content for your meshes in here, like I don't, then you can import it, and then if you do, you can go ahead and use that cube, but really you can use whatever you want. Make your own cube if you want. And I just gave it a random material, the cube material. It's just plain, but choose whatever you want, obviously. And then I set my location, rotation, and scale to the values that I wanted. Nothing in here is really needed. You might want to take out some things that are performing checks, like we don't need to generate overlap events on it and everything, but we're going to cover that for all of our actors later in the series to really clean and optimize, so you don't have to worry too much for now. So at this point, I have my static mesh that I want to use, and I just literally put it in a spot, copied it, pasted it, and I have static mesh 1, static mesh 2, static mesh 3, static mesh 4, static mesh 5, static mesh 6, static mesh 7, and static mesh 8. If you want, you could pause the video at each of those points and use my location, rotation, and scale, but really I just threw this together, so you use whatever you want. None of these settings are going to be different for anything else other than the location, rotation, and scale, so you don't have to worry about that. And anyway, I have my random CS actor now. So this is the actor I want to spawn on my character select screen. So I'm going to go back there, and I'm going to choose my class as random CS actor. Then I'm going to drag off of it and set my character widget reference P1, because this is my character widget reference. It's a 3D model of a question mark. It doesn't have a skeleton, but it is still the actor that I'm using to represent the character choice. And this is just a variable that we have in here. This is what I was showing you earlier with the sound effect. So I drag off the return value, set character widget reference P1. Now that was for player 1. Player 2 is very similar. So my switch needs to go not from 0 to 2, but from 0 to 7. And on index 7, we are going to do our random logic. So specifically, I'm going to grab location marker P2. That's important. Don't just copy it from above. It's got to be player 2's location marker. Otherwise, it'll spawn in the wrong spot. Grab the default scene root off of that. Get the world transform and call spawn actor from class. So spawn actor from class. And we're going to want our random CS actor. Just like this. Then we're going to drag off the return value and set character widget reference P2. Alright, and now we will actually spawn our model. It probably won't be in the right spot, since it's not a skeleton and mine was a little bit bigger and rotated differently. I'm going to want some manual changes, but again, I'm going to go over that with you live toward the end of the episode. Now, let's go to our stage select screen or our level select screen. So mine is level select screen. I'm going to go to the graph, and I'm going to go to move selection. So like in the character select where we were determining the character to display, we also determine the stage to display while we're moving over them in the level select widget. And that is actually in my move selection. I didn't make another function for it, so after we determine where we move to, we were going into this switch statement right here. Here we had from 0 to 3 because I had index 0, 1, 2, 3. But again, I'm going to need to go to index 7 because 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 is random. So index 7 is random. And that's the one we need to fill out for today's episode. So everything at the previous indexes is perfectly fine. The only thing we're modifying is index 7. So if we drag off of the switch statement, index 7, I decided to do a video for my random, but you could do a stage preview using 3D models like we did above. That is very much open to you. It is a little bit more complicated than the video, but of course you can follow the behavior we already have. Essentially, you would grab the stage camera array, loop through each element, grab the capture component 2D and the component tags, and then check the first tag and see if it's equal to something like random. If it is, you would want to set it to not be hidden and set it to be visible. And if it's not, you would want to set it to be hidden and not visible. Then you would want to set the background stage preview to be hidden. This is the one that we have that's for our videos and not our 3D renders. And then we want to set the render target preview with the static mesh component that we're actually playing the preview on to be visible. So you could absolutely do that. But for me, I just took a video that I made and played it here. So going off of index 7, I grab my stage select preview media player and I call open source. So if I go to my movies folder, my Trail the Wise preview in here, this is the one for the forest area. Then we have the refinery or the furnace area. And I've added a new one today called random stage selection. So basically I have an MP4 file that I just imported into the project. So here is my content folder for my fighting game. And then I have my movies folder. And now I have this random stage selection video that I made. And it is just this little blinking of a question mark. It's that simple. But I imported this into the project by going add import, import to game movies, then selecting my file and opening it. When I did that, I got this file media source right here, random stage selection. So at this point, I can go to my level select screen and I can put that in the open source. Now the background stage preview, as I mentioned, is what we play our videos on. It is essentially the background of this widget. So we don't have to hide anything else. We don't have to hide the 3D renders or anything like that. We can just set the visibility of this background to be visible. And once we do that, then we will be able to see that random stage selection. So after doing this logic, you should pretty much be where I'm at now. And the sound effect should work on this, by the way. The behavior for the stage random is a bit different, so you should hear the confirm sound effect when you press it here. The next thing we want to do is actually put our question mark in the right spot, so let's go ahead and take care of that now. I plan to do this live, but it took me a little bit longer than expected, so I'm just going to show you the values that I have for each one of these static meshes. Now, another thing we should do to make this a little bit cleaner is go back to the character select screen and go to the display character choice function where we were setting up our markers and the random CS actor. Our location markers were actually rotated to match the side that they were going to be on. So if you were player 1, the characters were facing to the right. If you were player 2, the characters were facing to the left. This is the right thing that we want to do for the vast majority of the time, but since the random icon is a question mark in my case, I don't want to use the actual rotation of the location marker. I always want it to be displayed the same way. If I flip it, it no longer is a question mark. So to fix this issue, I can simply right click on the transform on the spawn actor node and split the struct pin. That way I can break it up into the location, rotation, and scale. And then I can drag off the get actor transform and break it. At this point, I can drag them in for the location and the scale. Rotation can be left alone. This way the question marks look exactly the same regardless of the side or the player that is selecting them. This will only occur for the random, so all the other characters will still function as intended. Anyway guys, I hope you enjoyed this episode. I know it's a simple one, but it's important to have our random working as intended. If you did enjoy, please subscribe. It does more for myself in the series than anything else you can do, and I just really appreciate it. If you'd like to support the channel in other ways and get some benefits while you're at it, then check out the Patreon, YouTube membership, and Discord subscriptions like so many of you kind souls already have. Thank you so much for the love and support. I'm so excited to see what we can do with this series and really all the series. If you had any issues with your random or really any of my videos, feel free to join the Discord community. I'd be happy to help you out and it's completely free. But otherwise guys, thank you so much for watching. I'm Shawnthebro and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye guys.